Hey everyone, it is said that architecture begins where engineering ends. And to understand more about this exciting profession, we have with us today Amit Prothi, who's an architect by qualification and an urban development specialist with over 20 years of experience. He's currently the associate director of a corporation called 100 Resilient Cities, has worked in over 11 countries with governments, has been a consultant to the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. He's also pursuing his doctorate in urban studies and planning at the MIT. So it's a huge privilege for us to have Amit Prothi on the show with us today. And I also want to tell you that we've done a previous video on architecture and you'd want to go back and watch that as well. And before we request Amit to join us on the show, please subscribe to the channel, press that little red button and the bell notification button. Like us at Facebook, at Instagram and at Twitter at ChetChat101. And now let me welcome Amit to the show. So Amit, thank you so much for being with us today. And it's such a pleasure. I know you're on this whirlwind trip to Bombay and we've just caught you for this 1 hour.
I think it's a pleasure to be.
So tell us, you've had this career spanning from architecture into urban and regional planning.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about architecture because that interests a lot of our students.
Sure.
What would you say would be the pros and cons of being in this career for today's students?
You know, it's a very exciting time to actually be in the profession. At this point, half the world is urban. By 2050, we're going to be adding something like 75% of the population will be living in cities, which means the demand for housing, the demand for offices is going to just continue to grow.
Right.
So as a student, it's a very, very promising field to be in. There are challenges. The architecture's profession is very linked to the economy. As long as you're willing to ride through those fluctuations, if you're willing to be a little bit bold, there's a lot of excitement, lots of new things happening, lots of opportunities in the profession.
Some of them that are in school and are planning this career. So let's start from the very beginning. What subjects do you think they should be taking?
Sure. So, you know, architecture is a spatial field, right? One of the core things that you should be able to do is close your eyes and visualize something. So art helps, geometry helps. Like I was always a very good student in geometry.
Right.
Mathematics helps. You have to translate an imagination into something that's actually physically there.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be very good, but basic math is important.
Basic 3D conversion scales.
I mean, I won't even go into it's like the trigonometry, it's like algebra. It's simple, it's not sophisticated math. But the geometry side of it is you need to have a good handle on it. The other field that people sometimes don't think about is physics.
Physics. Okay. Okay.
Because if you think about it, you know, it's all forces. And a beam and a column has to take a certain amount of load.
Yeah.
Wind.
Gravity.
And then also earthquakes, you know, how do you withstand shakes if you're in an earthquake-prone area? You don't have to have a very good understanding of physics because you'll always have a structural engineer to help you. But you at least have to have some idea about how forces work.
So great. So there's art, there's mathematics, there's
geometry.
Basic geometry, of course, being the core of it.
Yeah.
And physics.
Yeah.
And softer side, the skill set, the mindset, what would you say?
Somebody who enjoys dreaming. Like I was a daydreamer in school. I mean, architecture is applied art.
Okay.
If you are an imaginative person, try the career. I think it's definitely worth it.
Tell us, you moved from architecture into regional and urban planning.
Yeah.
You did a master's at University of Massachusetts in Amherst.
Yeah.
You went on to enroll for a PhD program at MIT.
Yeah.
And talk about that transition and how it worked.
I always was curious about what's happening outside the building. How do cities work? So I decided actually first to enroll in landscape architecture.
Okay.
Because I wanted to understand how environment shapes buildings. And I had an opportunity at the University of Massachusetts to do a dual master's. I started taking some courses in urban planning, and I enjoyed that. So I started taking more courses, and then I essentially went full into urban planning. And urban planning, if I explain it simply, is trying to understand how the city is changing. And the change could be from a population side, you know, it's a growing city, or Indian cities, all of them are growing.
Right.
But often like in the US, for example, there are cities that are declining as well. And comparing that to the land that you have, the resources, the roads, the housing, it's somewhat of an exercise in estimating what's the change and how do you plan for that change. I mean, it's also a complex field. Cities are very complex. So trying to understand who are you making the city for, who are the different actors.
Nice. So tell us, architecture sounds like one good route to get there.
Yeah.
But let's say they want to go straight into
Planning.
urban and regional planning.
Yeah.
It sounds like a synergistic field.
Yeah.
So what could be possible other routes that they could
Sure.
follow?
So actually in India now, like the School of Planning and Architecture
Right.
has a Bachelor in Planning program.
Oh, nice.
So you go straight into planning. You could do sciences. So you do a 3-year degree in science or a 4-year engineering degree. A lot of civil engineers come into planning. People who are in politics. So if you've done political science, because there's a whole governance aspect to cities, you could come from an environmental field. So you've done, environmental engineering. So it's actually a very inclusive field.
So Amit, tell us, you've worked across numerous countries. I think 10 or 12 countries.
Getting there.
And you work with governments, you work with development banks. So what would you say have been your top 3 learnings from this?
I think the first one is, while the context may be different, the problem is similar. It's not the same, but it's quite similar. For example, if I'm meeting government, and if I'm meeting government in India, I will always start with trying to understand what is their need, right? So that their need idea applies everywhere.
Right.
It's not me walking in and telling them what they need, but rather them telling me what they need and me being able to listen. The other thing is, it's all about people. You are making cities, but you're making them for people. And I worked in China, I worked in Thailand, I worked in the US. Once you understand that I'm not dealing with an American or a Chinese or an Indian, but rather I'm dealing with a transportation expert or a government official, and they've got very similar motivations.
So tell us, of all these different projects that you've done at these countries, which one would you say was the most memorable one?
One I like the most is in China. I was involved in a flood management project, pretty complex project, and I had a team of 20 people I was working with, and all from different disciplines. So I had an ecologist. He could tell me the story of the landscape, like how old were the trees. I worked with a hydrologist who could understand, how water flows through that channel, the river. If you design something, how would that affect? Worked with environmental specialists who could tell me, how the water quality might change. I was working with social specialists because we had to make sure that there were not too many people who were going to be impacted by the project itself, like, displacement or resettlement, those kinds of issues. Economist, this was a loan that the Chinese government was taking from the Asian Development Bank. So they had to demonstrate that there was an economic value for this project, and financial expert who could figure out how to pay back the loan that they were taking. So, team of 20 Chinese and international consultants, and I was leading them. It was about a year-long project, and I really enjoyed being the glue to some extent.
Absolutely. Sounds fantastic to me. And the amount of learning that you would have done in this project too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talking about learning,
Yeah.
you went back mid-career to MIT, enrolled in a doctorate program in urban studies and planning.
Yeah.
So how difficult or easy was that?
I remember calling my wife at the middle of the night in my first semester and saying, I have to do this paper and I have no idea how to do it. Was not easy. When you decide to do something at mid-career stage, you have to do it.
Right.
I spent about 2.5 years at MIT. That is one of the best programs if you want to do international development work. For me, I'm a Delhi boy. And I always wanted to do something about cities in India. So it was a way to say, okay, I've done enough in the US. I understand how cities work. I do want to go and spend more time in Asian countries and African countries. And partly it was also a little bit selfish because this is where the boom is happening. So at MIT, I actually focused on water resource management and urban sprawl, which is why I could do the project in China.
Lovely. Yeah. And coming back to architecture for the students who are waiting to hear a little bit more also on that.
Yeah.
Which do you think within architecture, which domains do you think could be suitable for the future or future-proof or growth areas?
I mean, I think right now the first one I would easily say is building energy efficiency. There's a growing demand to understand how to make buildings more efficient, and that's not going to go away. All the way down to understanding of materials and how can you be energy efficient in even building materials. I would also recommend thinking a little bit about sustainability, because resources are going to be constrained in cities. Another one is buildings are getting intelligent. Right? I mean, the whole smart side of things, how IT sector can be combined integrated with buildings. I mean, even artificial intelligence now. And that's going to get more and more prominent.
I want to ask you for one last piece of advice that you want to give our students.
I think architecture is a creative field. Often you end up losing that creativity for a variety of reasons. If you can stay creative, you will really succeed in life. The way things are moving in the future, jobs are changing, people are moving around a lot more. Creativity is one thing that can keep you going through your life. I would emphasize that. Yeah. And be bold. Be bold. It's a field that allows you to be bold.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us, and the time and the inputs that you've given us have been completely fantastic. So thank you.
More than happy to. Thanks.
Hey everyone, I'm sure you enjoyed this ChetChat on architecture, and I'm also sure you still have lots and lots of questions more that you'd like to ask me or Amit. So put all your questions down in the comment section, and as you know, I always get back to each one of you personally. Also, don't forget that subscribe button, the bell notification button, and also like us at Facebook, at Instagram, and at Twitter at ChetChat101, and happy watching.